Good morning, Davids and Dragons. I am so happy to have you join me. Twice a week during the summertime, I'm going to read this book called Schooled by Gordon Korman. I think you're going to really enjoy it, no matter what grade you're in. It's a great story about kindness. You can either get your own copy or you can just follow along and listen. So, Chapter 1. Name Capricorn Anderson. I was 13 the first time I saw a police officer up close. He was arresting me for driving without a license. At the time, I didn't even know what a license was. I wasn't too clear on what it meant to be arrested either. But by then, they were loading Rain onto a stretcher to rush her in for x-rays, so I barely noticed the handcuffs the officer slapped on my wrists. "Who's the owner of the pickup?" "It belongs to the community," I told him. He made a note on a ring-bound pad. "What community? Golf course? Condo deal?" "Garland Farm." He frowned. "Never heard of that one." Rain would have been pleased. That was the point of the community, to allow us to escape the money-hungry rat race of modern society. If people didn't know us, they couldn't find us, and we could live our lives in peace. "It's an alternate farm commune," I explained. The officer goggled at me. "Alternative? You mean like hippies?" Rain used to be one back in the 60s. There were 14 families at Garland then. Now it's just Rain and me. I tried to edge my way toward the nursing station. I have to make sure she's okay. He was unmoved. "Who is this Rain? According to her social security card, the patient's name is Rachel Esther Rosenblatt." "Her name is Rain, and she's my grandmother," I said stiffly. "She fell out of a tree." He stared at his notes. "What was a 67-year-old woman doing up in a tree?" "Picking plums," I replied defensively. She slipped. "So you drove her here at 13? "I drive all the time," I informed him. "Rain taught me when I was 8. Sweat appeared on his upper lip. "And you never thought of just dialing 911? I regarded him blankly. "What's 911? "The emergency number on the telephone." I told him the truth. "I've talked on a telephone a couple of times in town, but we don't have one." He looked at me for what seemed like forever. "What's your name, son?" "Cap. It's short for Capricorn." He unlocked my handcuffs. I was unarrested. How could an able-bodied teenager allow his grandmother to scale a plum tree? Simple. She wasn't my grandmother at the time. She was my teacher. I was homeschooled. That was the law. Even on a tiny farm like ours, you had to get an education. No school bus could ever make it up the rutted, snaking dirt road that led to Garland. But transportation wasn't the only problem. If we'd been serviced by an 8-lane highway, Rain still would have handled my schooling personally. We wanted to avoid the low standards and cultural poison of a world that had lost its way. So that's what I was doing when Rain fell. Working on a vocabulary lesson. Most of the list came from the state 8th grade curriculum. Barometer, decagon, perpendicular. I could always spot the extra words Rain threw in. Nonviolence, Zen Buddhism, psychedelic. Microprocessor. I frowned at the paper on the unpainted wooden table. Was that Rain or the state? I'd never heard that term before. I stepped out of the house, careful not to disturb my science project. The Foucault pendulum suspended from the porch roof. The tester from the education department thought it was good enough to be entered in the county science fair. Too bad we didn't believe in competition, all that emphasis on trophies and medals, the shiny symbols of an empty soul. Anyway, Rain said the whole thing was a trick to get me to go to regular school. "If your project is excellent, it only proves that you're getting a superior education right here with me," had been her reasoning. I spotted her up in the tree, reaching across a limb to pick a plum. "Rain," I called, "there's a word I don't And it happened. 1 minute she was on the branch, the next she was on the ground. I don't even recall seeing her fall, just the faint cry followed by a dull clank. Oh! Rain! She was lying on her side, amid the scattered plums when I pounded onto the scene. Her face was very pale. She wasn't moving. My terror was total. Rain was everything to me, my teacher, my family, my whole universe. Garland was a community, but we were the community, the two of us. I knelt beside her. Rain, are you okay? Please be okay. Her eyes fluttered up and focused on me. She tried to smile, but the pain contorted her expression into a grimace. Cap, she began finally. I leaped back to my feet. I'll get Doc Cafferty. Doc Cafferty lived a few miles away. He was technically a veterinarian, but he was used to working on humans since he had 6 kids. He'd given me stitches when I was 8. She reached up a tremulous hand and gripped my arm. We need a real doctor this time, a people doctor. I stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Doc Cafferty had filled all of Garland's medical needs as long as I could remember. She spelled it out. You're gonna have to take me to the hospital. Rain always said that anger upsets the balance inside a person. So when you yell at somebody, you're attacking yourself more than whoever it is you're yelling at. Falling out of the tree must have made her forget this, because when the nurses finally let me in to see her, she was screaming at the doctor at top volume. I can't do 8 weeks of rehab. I can't do 8 days. You've got no choice, the doctor said matter-of-factly. You have a broken hip. It has to be pinned. After that, you'll need extensive physical therapy. It's a long process and you can't ignore it just because it doesn't fit in with your plans. You're not listening, Rain shrilled. I'm the caregiver to my grandson, the only caregiver. She shook her head. What about the parents? The doctor asked. Where are they? She shook her head. Long dead, malaria. They were in the Peace Corps in Namibia. They gave their lives for what they believed in. That sounds worse than it is, but I never knew my parents except from old pictures. They left when I was little. Besides, the rule at Garland back then was that we all belonged to each other, and it didn't matter who was related by blood. I have a few vague recollections of other people in the community when I was really young, but it's impossible to miss what you never have. I rushed to my grandmother's side. Are you okay? Is your leg all fixed up? She looked grave. We've got a problem, Cap. And you know what we do with problems. We talk it out, think it out, work it out, I said readily. It had been that way since the very beginning of Garland in 1967, long before I was born. Now that there were only 2 of us, Rain still gave me a full vote. She never treated me like a kid. The doctor was growing impatient. How about cousins, or maybe a close friend from school? I'm homeschooled, I supplied. The doctor sighed. Mrs. Rosenblatt? That name hasn't applied to me for decades. You can call me Rain. All right, Rain, I'm admitting you now. We'll operate in the morning, and I'll call social services to see what arrangements can be made for your grandson. That was when I started to worry what was going to happen to me. Interesting. So Cap has never even used a phone. He's lived on the farm all of his life with his grandmother alone. Let's see what's going to happen. Chapter 2, Mrs. Donnelly. Sorry, wrong voice. I need to do a Mrs. Donnelly. The instant I saw him standing there with all that hair and all those beads, I just knew. Garland Farm, it had to be. Nobody else looked like that. Nobody had looked like that since 1970, except at Garland. He seemed terrified, with good reason. No one knew what lay ahead of him for him better than I did. I held out my hand. I'm Mrs. Donnelly. He made no move to take it. Capricorn. Capricorn. Wasn't that just classic? My own name, Flora, was short for Flora Mundi, a world of flowers. It had been out of that place more than 30 years ago. I'd been out of that place more than 30 years ago, but one sight of this kid and it all came roaring back in a tsunami of day-glow ponchos and organic lentils. I was 5 when my family joined the community, too young to remember any life before that. For 6 long years, that place was my universe. I ran around barefoot, wearing peasant dresses, shared my parents with the other kids, protested the Vietnam War, did farm chores, and listened to a whole lot of sitar music. So help me, I didn't know how weird it all was until my parents decided they were too old to be hippies anymore. And we joined the real world. That part I remember like it was yesterday. This little flower child who barely knew how a doorknob worked suddenly dropped in the middle of society several centuries ahead of the one she had just left. I looked at Capricorn Anderson, and that's what I saw. Not a case, but a time traveler about to step into a world that had forgotten the 60s, except for JFK and the Beatles. In my right hand was a piece of paper with the address of the foster home the Department of Child Services had assigned to this boy. I crumpled it up and tossed it into the nearest trash can. Well, Capricorn, it looks like you're going to be staying at my house for a few weeks. Absolutely not, he exclaimed. I have to get back to the community. The plums aren't in yet, and after that, the apples. Everything has to be ready for when Rain comes home. I remembered Rain. She was one of the founders of Garland, the queen bee of the place when I lived there. I was always afraid of her. I thought she was a witch. Wait a minute. I put 2 and 2 together. Rachel Estra Rosenblatt is Rain, your grandmother? He brightened. You know her? That's when I figured out the key to Capricorn's heart, so I could do what needed to be done for his own good. I used to. Way back before you were born, my family lived at Garland. Rain would want you to be with someone who understands. I had a reluctant house guest. All right. Well, can't wait to see how Capricorn starts to survive in the world outside of Garland Farm soon. So join us again on Thursday and we'll read a couple more chapters. And this summer, make sure that you're picking up some books. Now that the library is open, you can go to the library and get a book, or you can read online on your tablet or Chromebook or laptop, and you can use Epic to read books online. So I will talk with you soon. Love you all, Davids and Dragons.